It's been a while since we've done an episode, and a lot of different things have happened. We're going to be covering as much as we can through the Canadiens NHL Draft, the expansion draft, and we'll also look ahead to free agency and, hey, maybe they might make a trade or two in this offseason. We'll have all of this and more on this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. I'm Julian McKenzie, your host for Hockey Inside Out, as always, with the illustrious panelists in front of me, Jessica Rusnak of CBC Daybreak Montreal, Stanley Cup champion Rick Green, and Montreal Gazette columnist Stu Cowan. We have to start with the Logan Mailloux story. It is the biggest thing in the NHL right now. It is something that has disappointed me a lot, frankly, and I'm sure that a lot of you on our panel today feel similarly or have other similar thoughts on this topic. You may have read up on what has been reported on Daily Faceoff with Logan Mailloux and the story involving him and a woman and a sex act that was caught via photo and then shared amongst teammates illegally. He was convicted. The Athletic also followed up with the victim of the story, who felt that they did not receive a sincere apology. You may know already about the fact that Logan Mailloux put out a statement days before being drafted asking teams not to take him in the draft, but the Canadiens took him anyway, and they have to deal with the fallout. What are your takeaways from the Canadiens making this draft selection?
You know, the Montreal Canadiens like to say that they are a classy organization, but this was such a classless move and such a slap in the face of the victim. They didn't even make an effort to speak to her prior to the draft. They had no plan in place on how to help her and her family. And frankly, they didn't even do a full character assessment of Logan Mailloux because they did not speak to the victim to find out why she didn't feel that he was remorseful and sincere. But for some reason, they spoke to his agent and spoke to him, and they decided that they were going to go ahead and give him a second chance. And yes, people deserve a second chance, but what has he done right now to deserve it? Is he remorseful because of what he did to this woman, or is he remorseful because his NHL career, a dream he's had for years, was close to be taken away from him and he had to say all the right things? The fact that the Canadiens had no concrete plans in place as to how they plan to help Logan Mailloux is also very alarming. They do say that he is in therapy with a lady psychiatrist, as Trevor Timmins had to point out. I think shows a lack of judgment there. And I think the Montreal Canadiens should be ashamed of themselves for doing this. And at the same time, Logan Mailloux should have stuck to his word and said, you know what, before the draft, I said, don't draft me. I don't deserve to be drafted. I'm taking this year to go talk to school-age kids, tell them why this is an action that could never be done again. And I will learn from it. And a year from now, we can revisit if I deserve to play in the NHL.
Logan Mailloux, the most mature thing he did was when he said he was renouncing himself from the draft. He said he wanted a year to work on his character and prove that he deserved the right and the honor to be selected by the NHL draft. I thought that was a smart decision by him. It's very sad that the Canadiens wouldn't listen to him and respect his wish in that situation. When Trevor Timmins was asked, the kid didn't believe he deserved to be drafted in the NHL. Why did the Canadiens believe he did? Trevor Timmins took a deep breath and then 21 seconds of silence, followed by asking if the question could be repeated. It just showed that they had no, I don't know if they didn't understand the backlash this would bring, if they thought that what Logan Mailloux did was no big deal and people wouldn't really care. It's really shocking that the way that they selected him in the first round. I mean, he's a kid who wasn't necessarily a first round pick where he was rated with the prospects. And just that the way they responded afterwards. And, you know, I've written a lot of columns, a lot of stories about this since it's happened, and reading the comments is very sad. And I wonder, reading some of these comments, if maybe the Canadiens were right thinking that most of their fans won't care. And if that's true, that's a really sad comment on society right now. Jeff Molson's silence since they drafted him speaks volumes. I can't imagine the CEO of any other company in North America in this situation basically hiding under his desk right now and hoping this would blow over without coming out and making some kind of a statement. I think all fans of the Canadiens, especially female fans of the Canadiens, deserve an explanation from the top guy who signed off on this, why he thought this was the right move to make. I think he owes it. And as I said, I can't believe the president of any other company in North America hiding under his desk. France-Marguerite Bélanger is a female vice president of this team. What are her thoughts on this? The fact that it goes right up, Jean Beliveau is rolling over in his grave right now over this. I think this is, people, second chances. Logan Mailloux, does he deserve a second chance? He does. He was a young kid. I have a 20-year-old son. I have a 22-year-old daughter. I've been weighing this, imagining myself on either side if this was my daughter or this was my son. If he was my son, I would at least hope the Canadiens would have respected his decision to not be drafted. If it was my daughter, I mean, I can't. I don't think so many people think this isn't a big thing. It is a big thing. These photos stay on the internet forever. This woman is going to be scarred by this, and it was a case of a young man trying to show off to his friends that a woman was a conquest, like a trophy, and boasting, and it's sickening. And the kid asked for a year off. If the Canadiens hadn't drafted him, this wouldn't be as big of a spotlight right now. It is for everyone, and I think the Canadiens made a big mistake here. And again, Jeff Molson obviously doesn't think so. He's just been quiet and has had nothing to say about it.
Well, for me, I don't want to downplay the severity of what he did. He's a kid that made a very, very bad mistake and, hurt a lot of people by doing what he did. And, there's no excuse for it. But on the other side, I'm not going to defend him, but I am going to say that a kid at that age, I don't care who they are, they make sometimes bad decisions. This is a bad one. He's admitted to it. Listen, I think that, he should not be marked for the rest of his career by something like this. He obviously has something to offer, judging by what the Canadiens have said and, obviously picking him where they picked him. And I believe that he deserves a chance to redeem himself as a good, fine young human being that made a mistake that's going to, try and correct himself through the opportunity to carry on with his life. And I feel bad for all the parties that are involved and the ones that he hurt, but I don't think that he should be marked to the point where he should be chased out of the game and really mark him as a young man that's did something bad, is held accountable for it. But he has to mature, he has to grow up, and hopefully he'll understand that this type of stuff will never happen again in his lifetime.
And if the Canadiens had given him the year as he asked for, and the other teams, I think it could have been that. He could have done some of the things that Jessica did to prove that it just was a one-time mistake that a dumb kid made, and then try and redeem himself that way and go back into the draft next year. And then it could have been, I don't want to say a positive story, but there could have been a positive spin to it. And that here, as Jess said, he could have kids today on their phones, teenagers do dumb things on their phones, on TikTok, on all that other stuff. And if there's one good thing that can come out of this story, is that it might be eye-opening for some other young teenage men out there who might be thinking about doing something similar, and maybe they'll have a second thought now and realize how bad this is. But again, the comments on this story have just been shocking to me about how many people just think it's not a big deal.
But what the Canadiens could have done is selected him and say, he's not coming to camp. He's going back to junior. We'll respect his wishes. And we have a plan in place. And this is what he is going to do to show us that he is remorseful and redeem himself and learn from this. But they had no plan in place. And it's 4 days later now, and there's been nothing said on what they plan to do. And I think that is what's extremely shocking too.
Well, I mean, you got to wonder what the Canadiens PR department was doing and their top management people, because obviously going into this draft, they knew they were going to take him if he was available, right? I mean, that was their plan. If he was available at number 31, they were going to pick him. They should have had a plan in place of how maybe that was it, Jess. Maybe we're drafting him. We're not going to bring him to camp this year. We're going to give him the year to get his life together and do everything that he wished he could do. But you said they had no plan. I think they didn't think it was a big deal. I think they thought people would just go, they'll be upset for a couple hours and then it'll just blow over. And so they went ahead and they did it. But we don't know, because Jeff Molson hasn't said anything to explain why they did this pick.
Well, and obviously they interviewed him before and got a pretty good feel on what this kid is all about, notwithstanding what his act was. But I really think down deep they're hoping this kid will right himself and try and repair some of the damage that he's done. And it's going to be a tough hill to climb for him. But by the same token, I think that he deserves an opportunity to correct the mistake that he made.
But after Marc Bergevin drafted him in his Zoom conference, he led us to believe that the Canadiens had spoken with Mailloux after he had said he didn't want to be drafted. Then when Mailloux spoke, he said that he never spoke with the Canadiens. Said maybe his agent did. He hadn't spoken with anybody. So again, they just for $1 billion organization, like it's run like a Mickey Mouse franchise, it seems.
Wow. Okay. So a lot of great points made just now. And I don't disagree with any of them. The one thing that I keep thinking about, and you alluded to it, was the fans. And while what hit me a lot with this story was seeing a lot of women, a lot of people with daughters, and just people in general just taken aback by this. And not just hardcore hockey fans, but casuals. Because remember, after that Stanley Cup final run, a lot of people in this city, a lot of people got on the Canadiens bandwagon. So there's still that kind of allure around that team. And that's probably why some of those people might have, been attracted to that story and still been around the team the same way that they are. But at the same time, you're seeing a lot of these fans who are just like, this is no big deal. Weren't you a teenager? You made a mistake. All this kind of stuff. And also a lot of people just propping up Logan Mailloux and propping him up and having no regard for the victim. And I think a lot of Montreal Canadiens fans, a lot of people in hockey culture need to put a mirror in front of their face and realize some of the things that they're saying and need to realize the impact of these thoughts that they have, because it's BS. It's absolute BS for them to think that way. When people make mistakes, when teenagers or young people or whatever, they make mistakes, they're supposed to go through a set of consequences. Yes, he did get convicted off of the crime they did, but he also needs to do enough to be properly atoned. And off of what we've read so far, it does not seem as if he's done enough to, let alone get the atonement from fans here on this, but from the victim. It doesn't seem as if that person got anything beyond that 3-line text, despite him saying that he's apologized on different points. That's what hurts a lot about this story. The fact that this person made a mistake, fine, and it wasn't like he served a jail sentence or anything. He was just fined. He was fined, and fine, that could be a considerable amount of money in any case. But still, off of that, they just think, okay, well, I'm good. That's not how that should work. And the Canadiens drafting him kind of messes that all up. Like, this is a kid who should be taking the year off and doing everything he can to rehabilitate himself and make the most of him trying to get a second chance. But instead, the Canadiens picking him basically sends this message that, oh, well, it doesn't really matter, if you made a mistake or anything like that, or if you didn't necessarily get proper atonement for it, we're still going to take you anyway. And it's not just a hockey problem. It's a sports problem. Because if you look in so many other leagues, NBA, NFL, so many major leagues, it's happened. It's a thing. It's not just a hockey thing. It's just a hockey thing in this context because of some of the crap that we've seen with Marc Bergevin, the Canadiens, and other NHL teams and hockey culture over the last little while. That's why it's so easy to just make it a hockey culture thing. But this is an inherent sports problem that has been an issue for quite some time, and there doesn't seem to be any stop in sight for it to, cease. So unfortunately, we're going to see more Logan Mailloux. We're going to see more of these unless teams actually develop some kind of conscience and realize, okay, maybe we shouldn't be giving these people these chances without them doing the work to properly rehabilitate themselves. And a lot of these fans who are trying to prop this up and try to make, hey, it's just a hockey thing and, the team shouldn't renounce the pick. Like, they should take a mirror to themselves and really think about what they're thinking of and realize the impact of what they're thinking, because it's absolute BS on their part to kind of propagate that sort of thing.
It's not just
I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that.
It's not just teams, though, Julian. The NHL sweeps this under the carpet. Look at what happened in the Chicago situation with the sexual assault there. Gary Bettman's just sort of swept that under the carpet. And Marc Bergevin,
the alleged will report it. That's what's been said.
Marc Bergevin's name could come up in that. He was director of player development there when that story happened. The NHL, Jeff Molson's been silent since the pick. So is the NHL. The kid didn't just tell the Canadiens he didn't want to get drafted. He told the NHL he didn't want to get drafted. You would think that Gary Bettman or somebody from the NHL would have made a statement by this point. But like with the Chicago Blackhawks situation, get out the broom, sweep it under the rug, hide under your desk for a little while and hope it blows over. I mean, maybe if Réjean Tremblay comes out with a report that somebody else like Vinny Danfus is going to be the next president of the Canadiens, maybe then Jeff Molson will come out and hold a press conference again. But it's I can't believe that the silence from the very top on this.
The last thing I'm going to say on this is just the fact that the victim said she didn't feel he was remorseful. The Canadiens said they do. It is showing that you do not believe the victim. At the end of the day, that is the message the Montreal Canadiens are sending.
I think that sums it up perfectly, Jess.
Believe victims. Let's go to the next point, which kind of continues along with Marc Bergevin. One thing I've realized from, I think a lot of people have realized as well, in light of the Logan Mailloux selection, it kind of brings to light the fact that despite Marc Bergevin preaching the need of character in his players, and maybe that could spread to personnel as well, you can look back on the history of some of Marc Bergevin's transactions, or at least people he might have been interested in, and you might realize that there are some players and other personnel that might not necessarily be seen as the most, I don't have the right word for it, but they might not necessarily be seen as the most high character guys in terms of some of their off-ice or on-ice transgressions. I'm thinking of the Canadiens' reported interest in Slava Voinov, who had his issues with domestic assault. I'm thinking of off-ice issues that went to players like Nick Cousins, who was once a member of this organization. And the main topic that I'm going to bring up in this next question pertains to one of Tony DeAngelo, the now former New York Rangers defenseman who from junior hockey has been associated with throwing out racial and homophobic slurs to opposing players. He came under fire for his association, or at least his support for President Donald Trump. And, you know, people will make what they will about political affiliations here. People say they're entitled to their own opinion, but he did make himself very known that he was a supporter of Donald Trump, and people will choose to take that for what they will. And on top of that, there was some other transgressions with him with the New York Rangers organization, which ultimately led to him saying, you know what, we're done with you. And now the Rangers have reportedly bought him out. And even when he was first away from the team, it looked as if the Canadiens were interested in getting him just around the trade deadline. And those rumors have continued. They've persisted into this offseason as we approach the free agent period. So the next question I just want to ask, like, what do you think of these reports that the Canadiens might still want to sign Tony DeAngelo? And I'm sorry, but you kind of have to bring in light what we were discussing in the first question with Logan Mailloux in the background of all of this.
I'm hearing that there's a very, very good chance that DeAngelo is going to sign with the Canadiens. His agent is Pat Brisson, who is one of Marc Bergevin's best friends. So here's a guy trying to get back into the NHL after all the stuff that you mentioned there, Julian, and it might be Marc Bergevin doing his buddy a favor and getting him back in. If they do sign him after drafting Logan Mailloux, it's a sign to me that the Canadiens are now the Oakland Raiders of the NHL. You know, just win, baby. Nothing else matters. You know, gone from where this franchise used to be, and you know, with Jean Beliveau and all the people who are leading at the top. I guess it you know, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you think back. This is a team that traded Guy Carbonneau, their captain, because he gave the finger to a Journal de Montréal photographer following him, you know, on a golf course, which is the extreme on the opposite direction. But it just shows that how things. And maybe they don't sign him, maybe they do. But if they do sign him, it just really shows me that character isn't as important to the Canadiens as it once was. And Marc Bergevin has spoken about how Shea Weber and how he changed the culture in the room, and it was all about character and all about everything. And now that Shea Weber is gone, maybe that changes.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, as Julian said, there's got to be a little concern about DeAngelo's personality and character, and you have to be really careful on, you know, the best you can in adding certain guys to your dressing room and disrupting the chemistry of what you have there, because they have a pretty good group of guys, and you throw somebody in there that's, you know, going against the grain in a lot of areas, both on and off the ice, it becomes a distraction, becomes a problem. So I think they have to think hard about this one. And obviously, sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But when you have a reputation that's out there from what we're hearing bits and pieces, you take even half of what you're hearing as being the real truth. You have to be concerned about you know, disrupting a good group of guys by bringing in this outside personality. And being more of maybe a problem than what it's worth. So they've got to make a hard decision on where they're going with this, and it should be interesting to see moving forward what happens.
And especially the fact that it doesn't seem like Shea Weber is going to be back on the team next year and be in the locker room and be that leadership figure that Marc Bergevin is always talking about, and being a great example to young players and the kind of character. And this is where I'm just confused with this team. Marc Bergevin was all about character, and the character was the reason why they were losing at a certain point, and that's why there had to be a shift in these players and get them away and get the guys in with the best character. Well, now you're going after these players that are going to be a huge distraction. You're creating a huge headache for yourself. If the New York Rangers said, you know what, we've had enough of this guy, get him out of here, why are you going to pick him up? And then you can't sit there with a straight face and say, no, character is still important for us. Like, it makes no sense. I just don't understand what's been going on with this organization. And I would love to hear their definition of what character is.
But there's also the other chance that they bring this guy in a really good dressing with a lot of good guys, and if he doesn't follow suit, then there's obviously somebody's going to make him held accountable for it. So I always say you try and surround yourself with as many winners as you can. If he gets into this environment where the Canadiens have had a taste of success with a very, very close knit group, maybe he's going to jump on board if they do end up signing him and say, I better follow the rest of the guys because I really don't want to disrupt this opportunity.
But the fact that he gets that second chance is problematic in itself. That's just my view on it, right? And maybe some people might look at it as just, you got to look at stuff that he does on the ice. But going off of what Jess said, off the fact that this person doesn't seem like a high character person, like, why should he get that opportunity to go into a locker room where the culture might be better? And hey, maybe he'll shape it up. Like, that speaks to a whole other problem, right? Am I wrong here? Like, that speaks to a whole damn problem. It's a whole problem. Like, there are so many other good guys in the NHL who would never even get that opportunity to better themselves in a good locker room environment. But because Tony DeAngelo possesses a smidge of offensive ability on the defensive side, is mobile. You mentioned, like, you got to win something. Like, what has he won? He hasn't even really, like, won anything as a player. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe he has some random Memorial Cup or some junior thing or whatever. He hasn't even won anything. We're not even talking about, like, a top 10 defender in this league. And the Canadiens all of a sudden are like, yeah, we really needed a mobile guy. Let's go get Tony DeAngelo. Are you kidding me? Like, what has Tony DeAngelo done throughout his career that would make a team like the Montreal Canadiens that interested? I don't get it. I don't get it. There are so many other guys on the free agent market that are going to be out there. They're going to be available. The Canadiens could have even said, you know what? Let's put something together for Ryan Suter. He's like 36 years old. Like, hey, let's put some pieces together for Seth Jones. Shoot, they could have even gotten themselves Calvin DeHaan. Why Tony DeAngelo? I will never understand it.
Well,
sorry for cutting you off.
DeAngelo is a puck-moving defenseman who puts points on the board. That's why
there are other guys out there.
But wait, getting back to my Oakland Raiders reference before, it seems like just win, baby. Nothing else matters. And that seems to be the Canes mentality. And maybe Jeff Molson thinks that the fans are okay with that. And judging by the comments, maybe they are. Maybe the fans don't care. Maybe fans just want to win. They don't care who's on the ice. But I say it's a big change from what the Canadiens once were when they were considered not only one of the classiest team in the NHL, but one of the classiest teams in professional sports. So again, we don't know if they are going to sign DeAngelo. Maybe they won't. Maybe the heat they got from the Logan Mailloux story might change their thoughts if they were thinking of signing him. But I think from the silence from Molson at the top, I think they're just win, man. It doesn't matter who we put on the ice.
We have to switch topic and discuss the rest of the Canadiens' off-season plans. Well, I mean, we don't know how much planning they've done with regards to acquiring a certain center in Buffalo who may be on the way out of his organization. I'm talking about Jack Eichel. There have been some reports going around. The Montreal Canadiens are interested in the former number 2 overall pick. I don't remember the year he was drafted, but I remember who went in front of him. Connor McDavid. He was behind Connor McDavid. Yeah, that year. So Jack Eichel being out there, I'm trying to remember some of the prices that have been out there for him. I've heard someone say like 4 assets might be it. I was doing like fake little like mock trades with friends, maybe a deal with Jesperi Kotkaniemi, 2 first-round picks, another play. Look, there's a lot of pieces that would have to go in for a Jack Eichel. Do you think Jack Eichel, first off, would you make a trade for him if you were the Canadiens GM? And do you think he'd be a good fit for this Montreal Canadiens organization?
Big asking price for Eichel. I mean, this guy, obviously great player, but bottom line is he's making $10 million a year. He's coming off an injury. I think that there's a lot of teams that are, trying to get him out of Buffalo. But I think in Montreal, I think they'd have to give up too much. And I think they'd really have to think hard about that one when they giving away some of their youth and their future. And again, I'm going back with just what I'm hearing about, his neck injury and nerve and all this stuff. I don't know where that's at, other than they had obviously a huge falling out in Buffalo. So I would be very concerned about Eichel. I don't know whether or not you could come up with something sweet enough to get him out of there. And I don't even know if he would, would be interested in coming to Montreal. So a lot of unanswered questions, but I would be really concerned about what it would take to get a guy like that, even though he would be a great player health-wise, and just the overall desire of Eichel, what he wants to do. I'm not sure about his personality also. Again, you run into a situation where your high-end players' personality and ego sometimes get in the way, and I'm not sure about him either.
Yeah, I think it would just cost too much for the Montreal Canadiens to get Jack Eichel. They're probably looking at players like a Nick Suzuki, a Cole Caulfield. You mentioned Jesperi Kotkaniemi. I think just because of the way he played in the playoffs, that it wasn't consistent enough. Maybe they would want an upgrade on Jesperi Kotkaniemi, first round pick. I just think, it's just too much money to get a player like him in Montreal. So I just can't see Marc Bergevin pulling this off.
I'm not a big fan of guys who want long-term multi-million-dollar contracts, and then when things aren't going well with the team, they want out of those contracts. The team made a commitment to you. You made a commitment to the team. You might want to honor that and stay there, and maybe try and build that team, as we saw in the NBA final with the Greek Freak, who signed a long-term deal and turned his team into a champion himself without wanting to get out when things were bad. Having said that, I mean, Jack Eichel is the type of player the Canadiens have needed for a long time. He's a legitimate number 1 center who puts points on the board, big guy, power play, everything else, type of guy that they could really, really use. But as Rick said, that injury thing in the background, you got to wonder about that. The Habs do have cap space, with Shea Weber gone and Tatar gone and Philip Deneau probably gone. That's another reason why they would need another centerman. They're going to have cap space that they could probably squeeze him in, but at what price? And how much are you going to have to give up? So if I'm Marc Bergevin, I'm definitely looking to try and make that deal. Whether the Canadiens, what do the Canadiens have in the 4 prospects? Jesperi Kotkaniemi would be one, but other teams might, I think other teams would have more to offer Buffalo than what the Canadiens have at this point. But it's definitely a deal that Marc Bergevin should try to make, because he's the kind of player that can be a franchise type player. Excuse me, he's young, and there's your number 1 center for the next 10 years, unless things start going bad with the team again, and then he decides, I don't want to be here and I want to get out.
Yeah, the Canadiens are going to be in need of a center, especially if it looks as if Philip Deneau might be on the outs. I imagine a deal with Jack Eichel would probably involve a Nick Suzuki, a Cole Caulfield, maybe even both, and first-round picks. I'll say this, though, in terms of, the fact that things did go bad after he was given the C, but I also think that the Sabres organization, I think some look has to be given towards them as well. Like, I'm not sure necessarily with the way that they've developed prospects over the last few years and just the teams that they've put together. I don't know how I feel about the Sabres organization. I think a lot of players who have been in there could probably use a breath of fresh air going out. And a guy like Jack Eichel, centers don't grow on trees, and that's something else that Marc Bergevin has said. You definitely have to make phone calls to Buffalo. You definitely have to see if it's worth taking on. And if it means putting a Nick Suzuki in that deal, if it means putting a Cole Caulfield, you have to at least consider it. I know we're low on time, so we'll go over to the next question that we have. Man, can you imagine a franchise mulling over the possibility of getting a franchise player, but his injury history seems to be getting in the way? Man, Imagine being the Seattle Kraken looking to pick Carey Price. Can you imagine if we had done an episode last week? That's all we would have been talking about. We completely missed that, but not to this point anyway. Carey Price, the Montreal Canadiens left him exposed for last week's expansion draft, and the Seattle Kraken said, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks. We are not going to take Carey Price. We're going to take Chris Driedger instead from Florida, and they take Vanacek. And I don't remember who it was Joey Decord from the Ottawa Senators who they took. So no Carey Price. How surprised were you when you saw that the Seattle Kraken were not going to take the Canadiens franchise talisman?
I was not super surprised. I think that Carey Price and Marc Bergevin had to feel pretty comfortable leaving him unprotected. A lot of questions when it came to his health. But also don't forget the fact that Carey Price is turning 34 next month. You know, if he was 30, if he was 31, I think it could have been a different story there. But there's a lot of baggage that Carey Price is coming with. And also, yes, they're a brand new franchise. They want to have a franchise player, but Carey Price is a guy who doesn't like to speak to the media, doesn't like to be front and center, and I don't think he would have been the kind of guy from a marketing standpoint that could have helped you out. But it was the thing that they had to do. They needed to keep Jake Allen. Seattle would have taken him, and it's perfect because Carey Price did need to undergo that hip surgery. He should be back for the start of the season, but you've got Jake Allen there in case there's any kind of delay in his recovery.
I was a little surprised they didn't take him because just imagine how many Carey Price Kraken sweaters they would have sold already at this point. And he was I was thinking of Seattle people watching that expansion draft, probably going, "Who are these guys?" You know, you're a hardcore hockey fan. You're like, "Who are these dudes coming up here wearing Kraken sweaters? I have no idea who any of them are." If it was Carey Price, it would have been a different scenario. I think people were even not necessarily hardcore hockey fans, but casual hockey fans would know who Carey Price is. So from that side, I was a little surprised. The contract, obviously, the 5 years left at $10.5 million, and the injury situation were obviously what they were weighing. And it looks like they made the right decision because now we know Carey Price is going to be out 10 to 12 weeks with a knee surgery. The Canadiens are saying he's going to be ready to start the season. Does anybody believe that? When was the last time the Canadiens were right when they said how long Carey Price was going to be out for? It's always longer than what they say, right? It's always 6 weeks turns into 3 months. So I'd be very surprised if Carey Price is ready to start the regular season. And I think with Carey Price, we're going to be in a similar situation as Shea Weber. I don't think there's any way that Carey Price finishes out the last 5 years of this contract. I think a year or two down the road, and it's unfortunate, we're going to be in a similar situation as Shea Weber where he just can't play anymore. When Stefan Waite was fired as goalie coach, he talked about hip, back, knee injuries that Carey has to play through and has to learn how to play through. And that's why they went out and got Jake Allen, because they realized he can't play 60 games a year anymore. So that all weighed in with Seattle. Do you want to pay $10.5 million for a goalie who can only play maybe 45, 50 games a year? That's what it's going to be like for Carey Price moving forward with the Canadiens. A lot of mileage on that body. He's a big body, a lot of force every time he drops down to his knees. I mean, he's built like an NFL tight end. He's not built like your average NHL goalie, or usually thin guys and rubbery, like Marc-Andre Fleury's like Gumby, right? He stands in all these different weird positions. So I was a little bit surprised Seattle at first didn't take him, but in hindsight, I'm sure Ronnie Francis is going, thank God we didn't take him.
Yeah. I'm not totally surprised Kraken didn't pick him up. I mean, like you said, 34 years old, just coming off knee surgery. I don't know about his health moving forward, how he's going to hold up, aside from that hefty price tag on his contract. So I think the bottom line in all of this is Carey Price's health. How well is he really going to hold up, moving forward with a big grind of the regular season? And I think he's pretty well beat and battered. And I think it's going to be really tough for him to continue to play at such a high level for an extended period of time. I hope, obviously, for him, but I don't know. His body has been taking a real beating, and I don't know how well it's going to hold up over the grind.
As Marc Bergevin said, his gamble paid off. He got to keep both goalies, but I'm sure if Marc Bergevin was being totally honest, he wouldn't have minded if Seattle took Carey, because I think it's the last chance he has to get rid of that contract. There's nobody else who's going to take that contract on. The only team that could afford to put $10.5 million on a goalie right now in a flat salary cap world was the expansion team. So, Carey Price isn't going anywhere for the rest of that contract. And there's no way Carey Price waives that no movement clause if it's not Seattle. I mean, that's where his wife's from near there. He played his junior hockey out there. I mean, that's the only other place in the NHL I could really see him waiving his contract, waiving his no movement clause for at this point. So I think it was the last chance for the Canadiens to get rid of that contract. And now 5 years left on it. As I mentioned, I'd be very surprised if Carey Price can stay healthy through the end. It'd be nice for him. I wish that he could, and for Canadiens fans, I wish that he could. But it just doesn't seem at this point that that's going to be possible.
And you have to be a little concerned when the comment coming out after his knee surgery is that it went as well as expected, whatever that means.
And his hip issue didn't need surgery. That doesn't mean it's not a
Thanks
hip.
for clarifying that.
There's still a hip issue, just didn't need surgery. So there's a lot of wear and tear on that body.
Yep, and it costs $10.5 million every year.
And $11 million signing bonus. There's an $11 million signing bonus in September.
Pretty pricey for Carey Price. And that's going to do it for this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. Pretty emotional start. Kind of cooled down near the end with off-season free agency, Carey Price talk, but a good episode nonetheless. Thank you so much for joining us, panelists. Thank you so much, everyone at home watching this episode. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also go to hockeyinsideout.com to check out full episodes, check out all of our content that's up there. And if you ever want to see us tackle any questions in a future episode, leave us a comment in the comment section below. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.